Hi, I'm William Wagner. For On Second Thought, we're interviewing here one of the three leading experts in family law, court, and father's rights. I'm here at the Santa Maria Inn in Santa Maria, California with Professor Stephen Baskerville, who's come all the way to California from Howard University, where he's a professor at Howard University in Washington, D.C. And you did 5 years of teaching in Europe besides, didn't you, Professor?
That's right, yes.
Welcome to On Second Thought. I'm glad to have you here on my show, and this is a lovely location, don't you think?
It is indeed. It's good to be here.
So you've been teaching at Howard University. You've spent 5 years teaching in Europe, and you've become deeply interested in fathers' rights issues. And do fathers get a fair shake in family court?
No, they don't. And it's...
Is there just bias against fathers?
Actually, it's a lot more serious than that. Many people have the idea that fathers go into divorce courts and they get treated badly because judges have a natural bias for mothers in custody cases. In fact, it's much more serious than that. What's going on in the family courts is that fathers are systematically losing their children. Fathers who haven't done anything wrong, fathers who have not agreed to a divorce or given grounds for any divorce. They are hauled into court involuntarily. They are stripped of their children. They are stripped of everything they have. They are stripped of most of their constitutional rights. They are told to stay away from their children. They are told to make extortionate, in some instances impossible, payments, so-called child support. They are ordered to pay the fees of attorneys they haven't even hired at rates of up to $2,000 an hour. What is going on in these courts is little more than kidnapping and extortion. It is a very dangerous situation.
Is this true in all the states? Is this happening everywhere in all 50 states?
It seems to be, yes, and in many foreign countries as well. We have created a machine, a huge divorce industry, consisting of judges, lawyers, psychologists, civil servants, bureaucrats, child protection agencies, who all have an interest in removing children from their fathers. That's the basic principle of the divorce industry and of family court, is get the child away from the father. Once the father is gone, then the courts essentially seize control of the children. And the elimination of the father creates a whole host of problems for the children that the state then solves. Or purports to solve, yes.
I've seen a lot of children taken away from their fathers. They seem to end up in federal and state prisons.
In many instances they do, yes, and oftentimes the children end up incarcerated too, in foster care or in juvenile detention facilities, or in being raised by social workers. Yes, what we are seeing here is, been going on for over 100 years now, is the progressive institutionalization of children. So
they take the father away because he can't make the child support payment. They recreate debtor's prisons, right? Wouldn't you call it a debtor's prison? And he didn't even ask for that debt.
That's right. In some ways it's even worse than debtor's prison. Debtor's prison, which are now formally against the law in most Western democracies, in fact required that the debtor incur the debt in the first place. In child support cases and coerced attorney's fees, the father didn't even incur the debt. The debt is simply imposed upon the father by the judge without any action on his part. In some instances, I should mention that mothers also fall afoul of family courts. It's not only fathers, mostly fathers, but if the father has political connections or connections with the judiciary, then oftentimes he can do it to the mother.
There was a case not far from where you teach in Howard University, wasn't there, Professor Baskerville, where the authorities tried to force the mother to say bad things about the dad and take him away from both parents.
This seems to be happening with increasing frequency. The Massachusetts News has broken several stories, and elsewhere there have been stories as well in other states, of intact families where the mother is not simply enticed into filing for divorce, she is actually coerced or threatened into filing for divorce. There's the case of Heidi Howard in Massachusetts and her husband Neil. She was ordered to take out a restraining order against her husband and divorce him under threat of losing her children. And when she refused, the social workers from the Massachusetts Department of Social Services seized her children and attempted to terminate her and her husband's parental rights.
Incredible. Did they succeed in doing that?
The last I heard, they haven't yet. There's still hearings pending. But the DSS has acknowledged that neither parent is violent, and there's never been an evidentiary hearing showing that either of them is guilty of child abuse.
Now wait a minute. You're saying there's never been an evidentiary hearing. They've taken the child away from the parent, at least temporarily.
2 children, yes.
And how long is that temporary? Is that a week, a month?
It's been going on for months, I believe, since February of 2000 that I know of.
That's 2 years.
Yes.
They've temporarily taken the child from both parents for 2 years. There's never been an evidentiary hearing, and they acknowledge that neither parent is violent?
This is as of last autumn, yes. I haven't investigated it since then. But These were the circumstances then.
This is a government gone way out of control. This is way out of control. Now, you put an internet story, I think, out, an Inquiry magazine or an internet magazine about a Brian Armstrong who was arrested and then somehow got beat to death in the jail, and he hadn't committed any violent crime.
That's right. He had, in fact, hadn't been accused of any crime, as far as I know. He was jailed without trial in Milford, New Hampshire. He died 3 days later. Another inmate said he heard Armstrong being beaten in a room and dragged away. He was dead within a week of having been incarcerated. There was a federal investigation into this. I don't know what the outcome of that was.
That witness was Bob Berg, wasn't it?
That's right.
And we've got that interview. We've got that interview of Bob Berg, and he saw the beating take place. And we'll go to that in another cut, but I want to get back to these cases. Did you hear about Dr. Brooks here in Santa Maria, who committed suicide in San Luis Obispo County courthouse parking lot after he walked out of his divorce and had nothing left and was not allowed to see his children?
I've heard of the case. I'm not familiar with it firsthand. There are many cases. The Massachusetts News has documented cases of fathers committing suicide. I've spoken with the widows and sisters of fathers who've committed suicide.
So it's not just like Brian Armstrong, who was a welder or working class. This happens to lawyers, doctors.
That's right. Augustine Kaposova of the University of California, Riverside, has written an article in the Journal of Epidemiology in which he shows that the divorce rate among divorced fathers has skyrocketed, and he attributes it directly to judgments from divorce courts and custody hearings and child.
You're saying the death rate or the suicide rate?
I'm sorry, the suicide rate of divorced fathers has skyrocketed, and he attributes it directly to judgments from divorce courts. When it was reported by 3 major news services, though, they covered up that finding and said that it was because of the fathers didn't have support networks or friends.
Ah, so the media
The media just completely distorted the findings of his. In fact, one media, Dr. Kaposova told me that one of the media outlets told him explicitly that his explanation for the suicides was not politically correct.
They told him that the truth was not politically correct.
That's right. This is what Dr. Kaposova told me.
And he's at Riverside.
University of California, Riverside.
I should get a hold of Dr. Capola, get him on the show. That'd be a good one. Any other tragic cases? Did you hear about the 2 fathers that froze to death in the Dakotas because they didn't have money to even rent a place? And they buddied up in the car. You didn't
I'm
hear
not
about
familiar
that.
with that case.
I didn't really hear about Dr. Brooks until just very recently.
That's right. I only know by word of mouth.
Okay.
There's a British organization that's compiled what they call the Book of the Dead, where they've compiled 55 cases where they claim the official coroner attributed suicides directly to divorce court judgments.
Now, what happened to the father in England that started a hunger strike and was going to starve himself to death because the court would not let him see his own children? Did he die, or did he?
That was Len Miskulin. No, I believe he didn't die. I think he's still alive. There was a gag order on that case. The British press was prevented from covering any information about the hunger strike.
The British press was gagged from even telling the truth that this man was on a hunger strike because he couldn't see his own children?
That's right. The Daily Mail newspaper did carry one story about it before the gag order, but even that information contained in that story was gagged by the British court, and it included a penal order which would criminalize any discussion of the story.
Make it a crime to tell the truth?
Not only publish the truth, but to discuss it and disseminate it in any way. In other words, the gag order said dissemination, which presumably entails dissemination on the internet by email, as well as publication.
That's how I found out about it. Yeah. And then I saw that there was like 40 or 50 copycat fathers in America, and I think a couple in England or Canada
and
that started hunger strikes.
There are currently 2 fathers in France that are on hunger strike as well, I believe, still.
Is this a civil society when fathers have to starve themselves just to get the right to see their own kids when they've done no violence, committed no crimes? Are we still a civil society?
Well, this is a very good question. Fathers, yes, they're starving themselves. They're committing suicide. In some cases, a few cases, they're actually taking out violence against the judges and the lawyers. This too has been suppressed in the media.
Interesting. Well, I can understand the violence against the judges and the lawyers. To me, that's at least rational. You're attacking the people who are extorting, money from you and destroying your life.
Taking away your children.
And taking away your children, even when you've done nothing wrong. I can understand killing the judges. I mean, on a rational level, that makes some sense. What doesn't make sense is committing suicide.
Well, these men often feel like they have nothing to live for.
Have you ever talked to any of these men, person to person, who have gone through this trauma before they get killed?
I've spoken to their families afterwards in many cases. There was a very important case of Darren White in British Columbia, Canada, who was ordered to pay more than twice his income in child support and cut off completely from his 3 children. He hanged himself, hanged himself from a tree.